At 6:15 a.m. local time, 15 Ukrainian drones raced across the Gulf of Finland toward Luga, Russia's largest Baltic port. It was said to be impenetrable, shielded by layers of air defenses. After flying 960 kilometers through the night, their engines burned hot and fuel gauges dipped dangerously low. Everything seemed calm until shapes emerged through the morning fog. A Russian patrol boat. The lead drone veered sharply as tracer rounds cut through the air. The patrol's 14.5-meter machine gun swept fire across the formation, the rounds close enough that a human pilot would have felt the shockwave. But there were no pilots, only operators in bunkers near Kyiv, watching grainy satellite feeds. The patrol launched 3 Igla-S missiles, weapons meant for helicopters, now chasing small silhouettes at dawn. The drones scattered, some climbing, others skimming just above the waves. One missile spun out of control, another exploded in empty air, and the third found its mark. A brief fireball over the Baltic. 14 drones pressed on toward Luga, now only 40 kilometers away. Then the S-400 battery came alive. Its gravestone radar had tracked them for minutes, but now switched from search to targeting mode. These weren't hobby drones. They were UJ-26 Beavers, purpose-built weapons known to challenge even Russia's most advanced air defenses. The radar operator was about to learn why his multi-million-dollar system feared these $35,000 machines. As the radar painted them, it fired a focused 3 GHz beam, measuring the reflected signal like sonar, but with radio waves. The Beaver's fiberglass and carbon fiber bodies reflected barely 10% of that energy, making them appear smaller than seagulls at 40 kilometers. The operator couldn't get a solid lock, so he tried another tactic: fire first, track later. 2 48N60M missiles, each worth $2 million, roared off their launchers. The drones dove to just 10 meters above the waves. The missiles tried to follow, but their control fins stalled at that angle, sending both into the sea. The S-400 crew switched to newer 9M96E2 missiles, equipped with tiny gas thrusters that allowed sharp turns even without airflow. These could pull 60 Gs and hit targets just above the surface. One missile struck, shredding a Beaver into carbon fiber confetti. Another detonated nearby, turning debris into a radar storm that hid the survivors. The remaining 13 drones broke formation, some climbing, others diving. But Russian defenses had planned for this. 4 Pantsir systems waited ahead, overlapping their zones to create a kill box. Designed as a last line of defense, each Pantsir combined long-range missiles with rapid-fire cannons, the goalkeepers of Russia's skies. Unlike the S-400, the Pantsirs followed a shoot-look-shoot approach: fire once, check, then adjust for the next shot. The first Pantsir locked onto the lead drone and fired a 57E6 missile. The formation responded with a wagon wheel maneuver, spiraling around a common center while moving forward, confusing the missile's guidance system. The gunner switched to twin 30mm cannons, spewing 5,000 rounds a minute into a cube of airspace. 4 drones flew through it. Only 2 came out the other side. 9 drones remained. Dozens of Russian missiles and thousands of rounds spent, and they still hadn't reached the port. Meanwhile, warning lights flashed across Leningrad Oblast's command center. Similar attacks were underway in Kursk, Bryansk, and Rostov, 14 drone groups striking across western Russia. Every air defense unit was already engaged. There would be no reinforcements. As the 9 survivors neared Luga, another obstacle awaited: the Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system. It looked like a shipping container on wheels, but inside was $20 million worth of jamming hardware. The moment the drones came into range, the system activated, flooding the airwaves with interference. The Krasuka worked by drowning communication frequencies in static, like trying to talk on the phone while someone blasts white noise through a megaphone. It swept across 1.2 to 5.8 GHz, hunting for the control links connecting the drones to operators nearly 1,000 kilometers away. Using a sweep and dwell technique, Russian EW specialists scanned rapidly to find the active frequency, then focused all their power at 2.4 GHz, creating a wall of electromagnetic noise. But the Beavers weren't simple remote-controlled drones, hopping between 128 different channels every second in a pseudo-random sequence. It was like constantly changing phone numbers mid-conversation, with only one side knowing the code in advance. In theory, it made jamming impossible, But the Russians had another idea. They countered with barrage jamming, flooding the entire spectrum at once. If you can't find the needle in the haystack, burn the whole haystack. The tactic should have severed the control link completely, but the drones kept flying. They'd switched to autonomous mode, using terrain contour matching, comparing radar altimeter readings to preloaded topographic maps. Every hill, bridge, and building had been recorded. They knew exactly where they were, no signals needed. Yet autonomy came with risks. 3 drones slammed into a construction crane that hadn't existed 6 months earlier when their maps were made. The metal tower appeared out of the fog too late to avoid. Carbon fiber against steel, it wasn't even close. 6 drones survived, but their batteries were down to 18%. The math was brutal. Enough power to reach the target, but not to dodge fire on the way. They had one chance. Meanwhile, the S-400 battery commander faced a nightmare choice. His $2 million missiles were built to destroy aircraft worth 100 times more. The drones attacking him cost $35,000 apiece. Even if he shot down everyone, Russia would still lose money. This wasn't just warfare, and it was economics with explosives. He ordered his men to switch to Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns, old twin-barrel 23mm cannons from the 1960s, cheap but deadly. A few dollars a round and a single hit could shred a drone, but these guns required optical targeting. Someone had to actually see the target. The drones flew low at 150 km/h, rolling every few seconds. The targeting computers needed 3 seconds of steady flight. They never got it. The gunners went old school, filling the sky with tracers and hoping luck was on their side. One lucky burst found its mark, ripping through a drone's fiberglass body. 5 remained. Luga port was just 8 kilometers away. Then nature joined the fight. As the drones neared the port, the rising temperature lifted the fog that had shielded them. What once hid them now blinded them. Visibility dropped to 30 meters. Both sides were flying blind. The Pantsir's thermal imager, normally able to spot aircraft 5 kilometers away, was useless. Fog scattered infrared light just like visible light, cutting range to 200 meters. The Russians fired blindly, creating walls of lead at likely approach points, betting the drones would fly through. 5 Ukrainian drones skimmed just 3 meters above the Baltic waves, their radar altimeters constantly pinging to avoid the water. Salt spray covered their lenses, turning video feeds into nothing but static. Operators back in Ukraine watched gray screens flying only by GPS. Desperate, the Russians activated GPS spoofers, broadcasting false signals to confuse them. 2 drones took the bait, banking sharply and crashing into the sea, vanishing into the fog. 3 remained, guided only by inertial navigation. At the port, security teams waited with Igla-S shoulder-fired missiles. The Igla-S's cooled seeker could detect minute heat differences, but the Beaver's small engines ran barely 40 degrees above ambient temperature. Against the warm Baltic mist, they were nearly invisible. Soldiers fired when they heard the drones pass, aiming at the faint glow of exhaust. 1 missile detonated within 5 meters. Shrapnel tore through a fuselage. Another drone down. 2 left. Mi-8 helicopter roared overhead, door gunners spraying machine gun fire at shadows in the fog. The pilot tried to use rotor downwash to knock the drones off course, 60 km/h winds that could slam them into the tanks below. But the downwash also cleared the fog, just enough for the drone's cameras to see the target, the sprawling cryogenic gas complex ahead. The facility's automated safety systems detected incoming aircraft and triggered emergency shutdowns. Sirens wailed as safety valves opened, venting thousands of cubic meters of methane and ethane to prevent tank explosions. But that created a new danger. An invisible, flammable cloud now blanketed the port. 1 spark and the entire facility would become a fuel air bomb. The defenders had no idea. In trying to save the complex, they had just built the perfect conditions for its destruction. Water cannon trucks raced to intercept the incoming drones, their operators firing high-pressure streams strong enough to punch through wooden walls. 1 drone flew straight into the jet. Its propeller snapped instantly, sending it tumbling onto the concrete. The warhead stayed intact but harmless. The last Beaver drone adjusted course, its thermal camera locking onto the unmistakable target, the cryogenic processor, glowing at -163 Fahrenheit. The Ukrainian operator switched to manual control through an Iridium satellite link, accepting a 2-second delay that made precision flying nearly impossible.